Hey heroes, welcome to another uncanny episode of History of the Marvel Universe. This channel is sponsored in part by Patreon supporters. If you would like to contribute and vote in monthly polls, then you can sign up for an amount of your choosing over at patreon.com/MaryMarvelite. The link is in the description below along with other places you can find me. This week's tale begins not on Earth, but within an extra-dimensional realm known as the Wildways. In that world, the dominant life form was a race of yellow-skinned invertebrates called the Spineless ones. Crawling along the ground, these beings naturally possessed the ability to absorb a wide range of communication signals. When a peculiar temporal anomaly caused television transmissions from Earth to be broadcast into the Wildways, many of the spineless ones were driven mad by the Terran programs, and they regarded the humans they saw in their minds as devils. There was at least one who was unaffected, however, a scientist by the name of Arize. He sought to lift his people out of the dirt, both figuratively and literally, and designed exoskeletons and artificial spines that would allow these spineless ones to walk upright. There were some who agreed and accepted his artificial spine grafts, but many refused, claiming a sense of integrity and pride. In the end, it was those who remained spineless and relied on other forms of locomotion that rose up to become the ruling class. After that, those in powers required workers to maintain their society, and so Arize embarked on his next project. He began designing a genetically engineered bipedal humanoid race, basing their design on what his compatriots saw in the earthly television broadcasts. There were some notable biological differences between Arize's humanoids and those they were based on, such as their porous bird-like bones, leathery skin, and the fact that each one had 2 hearts. The most outwardly noticeable, though, was that, much like the spineless ones themselves, most of the Wildways humanoids had 1 fewer finger on each hand than humans on Earth. Arize hoped that he could inspire the rest of his people to receive spines and walk upright, but the spineless ones had grown to hate all humanoids regardless of origin. The rulers of the Wildways then demanded that Arize instead use his genius to provide them with powerful weapons. However, Arize knew that doing so would only lead to his own people's demise, and refused to continue serving them. It was after all of that when a particularly large spineless one rose to power. Carried by a mechanical platform with spider-like legs and armed with a weaponized tail, this intimidating entity was known simply as Mojo. Asserting his will over the Wildways, he built a society entirely around television broadcasts. Apparently, through magical means, he drew power and influence by garnering high ratings from his followers, allowing him to seize more control over his dimension. To further build his power base, he enslaved the humanoid denizens of the Wildways, forcing them to participate in his twisted productions. Eventually, his influence was so great that the Wildways themselves became known as Mojoworld, and the dimension was dubbed the Mojoverse. Arize was also forced back into servitude, and feeling guilty over the humanoids' enslavement, sought to create a superhuman who could become their messiah. One day he stumbled upon a way to accomplish this when a mysterious man literally fell out of the sky. In truth, this warrior was a superhuman from the future known as Shatterstar, who had been thrown back to that point in time during a confrontation with the Hell Lord Mephisto. Fascinated by his unique genetic code, Arize studied Shatterstar's DNA and used what he learned in the creation of his humanoid messiah. He performed modifications and improvements on this new humanoid so that he would not be an exact clone, and endowed him with the power of self-determination. However, Arize was still trapped under Mojo's regime, and so the only way to get his new humanoid made was for it to be surrendered to Mojo and used in his various television programs. Emerging as a fully formed adult, the humanoid in question quickly became a star, and his ability to subconsciously affect probability fields to give himself good luck earned him the moniker the Lucky One. When he discovered this power, as well as his own desire for freedom, he joined his fellow bipeds in a rebellion against Mojo. He fought alongside and became close friends with another modified humanoid with similar luck-based abilities, the goat-like Quark. By this point, many of Mojo's bipeds were similarly animalistic in appearance, although it's unclear whether or not this was always the case. Around this time, Shatterstar was reunited with another man from the future, Richter, and the two jumped forward in time in an attempt to return to their own era. Meanwhile, Arize also aided the rebellion by bolstering their numbers with cloning technology. But then one day, the Lucky One was captured by Mojo's forces, and his memory was erased. He ultimately escaped and fled, and as luck would have it, he stumbled upon a random dimensional portal and leapt inside. He emerged on Earth with no idea of who he was or where he had come from. He met a survivalist named Elliot who took notice of his incredible luck and gave him the name Longshot. Meanwhile, the Lucky One was pursued by a number of Mojo's bipedal rebel hunters who followed him through the portal. Most notable among them was a 6-armed sorceress named Spiral. Needing a way home, Spiral and the others attacked a woman named Hester, killed her dog, and abducted her infant child. They planned on using the child as a human sacrifice in a ritual that would open a portal back to the Mojoverse. However, Longshot had a strong desire to do good, and upon reading about the abduction in the newspaper, decided to intervene. He and Elliot went to Hester's apartment, where Longshot displayed another of his superhuman powers. By holding an object in his hands, he could telepathically interpret psychic imprints left behind by others who had handled it, an ability referred to as psychometry. Doing so also caused his left eye to glow with a noticeably bright light, something common across his various powers. He was able to use what he saw to track down and rescue the abducted child. After that, he bid his new friends farewell, but he would continue to make more as he embarked on a journey to discover his own identity. One of the most noteworthy of which was a professional stunt performer, 𝑀𝒿𝑜𝓌𝑜𝓇𝓁𝒹. While working with Rita on a movie, he discovered that there were limits to his luck when he was badly injured during a stunt. As it turns out, his probability powers only worked when his motives were pure, and so they could not be used for personal gain. Furthermore, because Longshot's contract was illegal, the director tried to cover up the accident by throwing his body into a river. Of course, Longshot survived and recovered after being pulled out of the water by a man named Theo, who landed on his body during a failed suicide attempt. The two then embarked on a misadventure in which they stole diamonds from a greedy power company, encountered the rebel hunters from Mojoworld, and accidentally caused a blackout across Manhattan. After that disaster, Theo decided to return home to his family, while Longshot attempted to give the stolen diamonds to the people affected by the blackout. He traveled to Manhattan, where he encountered human heroes like the sensational She-Hulk, as well as the amazing Spider-Man. He met the sorcerer Dr. Strange and, more importantly, reunited with his old friend Quark. From him, he finished piecing together his slowly returning memories and learned that their probability powers did have a drawback. By giving themselves good luck, they caused a probability backlash that resulted in bad luck for someone else, or perhaps even themselves at a later time. Meanwhile, Spiral successfully returned to the Mojoverse and told her master about the planet of humanoids that she'd found. The two combined their magics to travel to Earth and searched for Longshot together. Investigating clues to his whereabouts, they found the stunt woman Rita Wayward. The two Mojo Worlders tortured the innocent woman by tying her to the front of their ship as it traveled between dimensions. When Longshot made his way to Rita's home, he found her there suspended with ropes and rendered comatose by the experience. Fortunately, Dr. Strange and his associates were able to help her make a recovery. In the end, Longshot and his allies confronted Mojo and Spiral, forcing them to retreat back to Mojoworld. Longshot and Quark pursued them through the portal, and Rita volunteered to join them and aid in the rebellion. Unfortunately, Longshot turned out to be a fallen messiah, doomed to fail over and over again in a perpetual cycle of reruns. Fully aware of the Earth and how to get there, Mojo sought to use the planet's inhabitants in his schemes to maintain control over his realm. One person he took notice of was Betsy Braddock, an English mutant who adopted her brother's superhero identity, Captain Britain. This did not go well for her, as Betsy was brutally blinded by a supervillain known as Slaymaster. In the wake of that, Betsy was captured by Mojo and Spiral, who replaced her lost eyes with cybernetic implants. Mojo gave her a new name, Psylock, and brainwashed her into starring in a new television program called The Wildways. However, she was ultimately rescued by her brother Brian and the New Mutants. She stayed at the X-Mansion during her recovery, little realizing that her cybernetic eyes were broadcasting images of the X-Men back to the Mojoverse. In an attempt to boost the ratings of this program, Mojo erased Longshot's memories again and dumped him through a portal into the X-Mansion. He also covered Longshot in a chemical goop that de-aged him and the X-Men who came into contact with him. He broadcast the ensuing clashes involving Spiral, the New Mutants, and the X-Babies, but of course in the end the mutant heroes were victorious and everyone was returned to their proper ages. This time, however, Longshot remained on Earth and ultimately joined the X-Men alongside Psylock. He was involved in a number of battles and adventures, during which he grew closer with his teammate Allison Blair, aka Dazzler. Due to Mojo's mind wipe, he had no memory of his previous time on Earth, even after seeing the film that he and Rita worked on and recognizing his own name in the credits. Although he also took notice of the name Ricochet Rita and found himself wishing he could meet her. When he encountered Spiral again, he didn't recognize her either, but could sense something other than hatred and rage coming from her. Not long after that, Longshot, Dazzler, and Psylock were all among the X-Men who sacrificed their lives to defeat a demonic foe known as the Adversary, only to be resurrected by the omniversal guardian Roma, daughter of the mythical wizard Merlin. With the world believing them dead, the team then moved to the Australian outback, where they operated covertly. During this time, the romance between Longshot and Dazzler continued to blossom, and the pair made their relationship official. Initially, there was some friction as Dazzler grew jealous when her new boyfriend spent time with his other female teammate Rogue, who Dazzler had a bit of a history with. Although Longshot made it clear that he and Rogue were friends, and despite still lacking memories of Mojoworld, he had a very strong aversion towards being treated like someone else's property. Later, feeling incomplete due to his amnesia, Longshot began to have dreams about the various women in his life, including Dazzler, Rogue, Rita, and even Spiral. During at least one of these, he dreamed of Spiral tearing out his spine and of himself becoming a spineless one like Mojo. Entering into a mystical dream state, one likely related to the Dreamtime of Australian Aboriginal myth, he began to mysteriously fade away. The Aboriginal mutant Gateway also summoned Storm's spirit into the dream so that Longshot could bid the X-Men farewell before he disappeared completely to find the answers of who he was. We'll get back to Longshot in a bit, but in the meantime, you may be wondering what became of Ricochet Rita Wayward. Well, after traveling to the Mojoverse with Longshot, she was captured by Mojo and strapped to the front of his ship yet again. Meanwhile, with the X-Men believed dead, Mojo's ratings fell, and so his servants attempted to appease him by creating a variety of modified X-Men duplicates from sentient celluloid. Most of these were destroyed upon immediate rejection, but they then presented a copy of his previous feature, the X-Babies. While Mojo personally hated them, the miniature mutants proved to be highly popular in Mojoworld. However, the X-Babies soon escaped, freeing Ricochet Rita in the process. Rita decided to stay with the children and watch over them, attempting to keep them safe. They tried to flee back to Earth, and while the kids got away, Rita was captured and brainwashed into becoming Mojo's masked servant. As the agent, Rita pursued the X-Babies, but was ultimately defeated after they allied with another superhero team, Excalibur. Mojo then revealed that Rita had signed a contract binding her into a life of servitude forever. The X-Babies offered to return and star in the Wildways in exchange for Rita's freedom, and Mojo agreed. However, Rita herself was unwilling to leave the kids alone and quickly followed them through the portal. Falling back into Mojo's clutches, Rita was eventually subjected to further tortures and mental conditioning. Eventually, Mojo coerced Arize into making further modifications to her body through bio-cyberonic implants, giving her 4 additional arms. With her body rebuilt and her mind reprogrammed, Rita was then sent back in time to serve Mojo's earlier self as the 6-armed sorceress Spiral, creating a closed time loop in the process. That isn't the only time loop involved in the story either, by the way. Sometime after Longshot's disappearance, his creator Arize traveled to Earth. In an attempt to show his people the value of freedom, he built an array that would absorb and redirect television broadcasts, allowing him to control what signals were sent. However, when he attempted to redirect those broadcasts through the dimensional breach into the Mojoverse, he inadvertently sent them backwards in time, where they were received by the original Spineless ones, driving them mad. Shortly after that, he was attacked by Spiral, who sought to punish him for what he'd done to her, even though from his point of view, he hadn't done it yet. He was rescued by the mutant Team X-Factor, but Spiral declared that the enslavement of Mojoworld's humanoids would last for over 100 years, not ending until the son of a human and an Arize spawn led them. She escaped back through a portal, bringing Arize with her, but not before claiming that the name of that future leader would be Shatterstar. Now, with all that explained, let's turn our attention back to Dazzler and the X-Men. During a battle with the cyborg Reavers, Psylock decided to save several of her teammates by sending them through the Siege Perilous, a mystical gateway she received from Roma. Dazzler was sent to Malibu with no memory of who she was, but she was found and recovered by another mutant, 𝑀𝒿𝑜𝓌𝑜𝓇𝓁𝒹. He was a bodyguard for the mutant musician Lila Cheney, who Dazzler had previously worked with. Lila took Allison in and tried to help her regain her memories, but with little success. And then one day Longshot basically dropped out of the sky in front of the two women. As it turns out, after disappearing from the dreaming, Longshot wound up back in Mojoworld, where he regained his memories. He returned to Earth to reunite with Dazzler, but this time she didn't remember him. However, there was little time to explain, as Spiral was hot on his trail. Lila attempted to teleport all 3 of them to safety, but Mojo's flamboyant assistant, Major Domo, redirected their jump to Mojoworld. Unable to teleport back out of the Mojoverse, Lila and Dazzler joined Longshot's rebellion against Mojo. Over the following weeks, Dazzler's memories slowly returned while she and Longshot rekindled their romance. When the rebellion started losing ground, Dazzler found a humanoid named Meek who could bring her back to Earth so that she could enlist the aid of the X-Men. However, Meek was actually a spy working for Mojo, and he sent the X-Men straight to his master. Mojo then forced Longshot and the X-Men to star in another twisted production, The Wizard of X. Meanwhile, Dazzler came upon a rival producer who identified himself as Mojo 2, the sequel. He was evidently a humanoid clone of the original Mojo, but was considered a failure due to his capacity for compassion. In the end, the X-Men broke free from Mojo's trap, and Longshot delivered a finishing blow as the bloated tyrant disappeared. In the aftermath of that battle, Professor Xavier revealed that Dazzler was pregnant with Longshot's child. The two remained on Mojoworld, entrusting control of the planet to Mojo 2 so they could focus on raising their son. With Lila's powers no longer being blocked, she returned to Earth with the X-Men, while Longshot suggested naming their baby Shatterstar. Longshot and Dazzler got married, although they were soon called into action again. Proven to be as much of a despot as the original, Mojo the sequel began oppressing those he deemed imperfect. He sent assassins to terminate the X-babies, seeking to erase any trace of his predecessor's success. However, they were ultimately rescued by Dazzler. As for her own child, when the baby was only a few weeks away from being due, she and Longshot were attacked by Mojo's forces and separated, sending her into labor early. Fortunately, she was aided by her ally Richter, who, unbeknownst to her, had traveled there from another point in time. Okay, so, follow me on this. As mentioned earlier, sometime after all of this, during a battle with the demon Mephisto, both Richter and Shatterstar were sent backwards in time. They were initially separated, but Richter found Shatterstar and learned that Arize had used his DNA to create Longshot. The two then jumped forward in time, trying to get back to their own era, but instead reached this point where Dazzler was alone and just about to give birth. While the circumstances were less than ideal, Shatterstar knew that they needed to help deliver the baby boy. But in order to preserve the timeline, they then had to use Mojoworld's technology to erase parts of Dazzler's and Longshot's memories to make them forget that she was ever pregnant. They then brought the child 100 years in the future, where the Mojoverse was ruled by Mojo 5, and gave the child to a couple who would become his foster parents. The baby was given the name 𝑚𝒿𝓌𝓁𝒹, but as the boy grew into a man and became a master sword fighter in the gladiatorial arena, he eventually took another moniker, Shatterstar. He eventually escaped from the arena and joined forces with the Mojoverse rebellion of his era. With the Resistance losing ground, the rebels decided to send Shatterstar to Earth so that he could enlist the aid of the X-Men, just as Longshot had done a century prior. He traveled to the past, where he found not the X-Men, but a team of new mutants led by another time traveler, Cable. With his own equipment damaged, 𝑀𝒿𝓌 agreed to join Cable in exchange for his eventual help in overthrowing Mojo 5, and thus Shatterstar became a founding member of X-Force. He did eventually get back to his own time and take down Mojo's regime, but perhaps the details of that are best left for another day. And yes, this Shatterstar is in fact the same one who later went back in time and whose DNA was used to create Longshot. In other words, genetically speaking, Shatterstar is both Longshot's father and his son. Now, there's probably more I could dig into when it comes to Longshot and the Mojoverse, but that's all the time we have for this week and all the time travel that I can handle for now, so let me know in the comments if you want to hear more about this stuff. In the meantime, that is all I have for you this week, and thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, be sure to leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and share it on your favorite social media. As always, the issues referenced in this video are listed below if you would like to read them for yourself, as well as links to other places you can find me. As always, let me give a special shout out to all of my Patreon and Ko-fi supporters, Twitch subscribers, and YouTube members who help make the channel possible. By signing up for any ongoing amount on any of these platforms, you will get your name in these special thanks here, but Patreon is the one that helps determine what topics get covered on the channel via monthly polls. And of course, if there is anything in particular that you want me to talk about, be sure to let me know in the comments below. But that is indeed all I have for you this week, and so until next time, true believers, Excelsior!